On this episode of the How to Sell More podcast, what I learned about sales from the American Gladiators. I'm your host, Mark Drager. Let's get started. So a few weeks ago, I was on a plane flying back from Florida from an event I was at. And sometimes I like to download some stuff off Netflix so that way while I'm on the plane, I don't feel compelled to work all the time, especially if it's a long flight. And I downloaded Muscles and Mayhem, an unauthorized biography of American gladiators. That's my announcery voice. I hope you like it. Anyway, I download this multi-part documentary kind of showing the behind the scenes of American Gladiators. Now, I'm 40, and so as a young boy at my dad's place, I watched on Saturday and Sunday afternoons a lot of American Gladiator. And I just loved the show. It just as a kid of the early 90s, it totally captured my attention. And so when I found this documentary, I was like, let me dig into this and see what's going on. But in the first episode, talking about the pilot and how the show came to be, there are some really serious lessons we can take away in terms of how to sell something that is basically unsellable. And so not only was this show originally a mess, I'm going to break down kind of step by step how they got it sold, but it was a mess. It was countercultural. Frankly, nobody wanted it. Nobody wanted to buy it, and no one knew how it would work. And somehow they sold it, and it became one of the highest rating shows in the early 90s. So let me paint the picture of how this show actually came to be. So this dude who is an Elvis impersonator owns a gym. So imagine the character who owns a gym and is an Elvis impersonator. That guy comes up with this idea for American Gladiators, just the name, American Gladiators. It's like running some kind of competition or something in some local market. And he decides that he wants to turn it into a TV show. He thinks it's the greatest idea, American Gladiators. Well, what is it? They don't even know. So they got to go through development like people often do. They got to figure out, well, what is the show and what's the premise and how does it work and will it be a competition and how much will it cost? And they got to basically flesh it out. And that's what happens with every movie and every show. So they bring together a team of experts whose job it is to basically make this up as they go along. They bring together some stunts people. We're going to figure out the competitions. Now, if you remember American Gladiators, the whole idea is that there are gladiators who are superhuman, and then there's average people, average Joes, so to speak, who have to try and compete against them. And American Ninja Warrior today and all these other competitions are totally based on this original show. But when they were developing this in the mid to late 80s, no one had ever done this before. They'd never seen anything like it. And so job number one was they had to be able to sell the concept. They had to bring people on to actually figure out, well, what would these competitions be? And how would we cast people? And would there be a point system or not? And they had to just figure all of that stuff out. So they bring everyone together and they try to sell the show, and no one will buy this show. They go from network to network to network. No one wants it. No one gets it. No one understands it. No one will touch us with a 10-foot pole. And finally, they get a production company who is willing to finance a pilot of this thing. They're willing to buy it. And it's a syndication company. So it's not a network. It's a company who makes stuff and then resells that stuff to other networks for airtime. And they get this company who's willing to do it, and they go ahead and they shoot a pilot. And the pilot is a train wreck. It is one of the worst things they possibly could have produced because no one knows what they're doing and no one realizes how hard this really is. And so they walk away from this pilot shoot and they don't have an episode that they could possibly show. So here's lesson number one. When it doesn't go the way that you thought it was going to go after this huge investment of time and money and effort to create this one thing, this beta, this demo, this one thing you're using to sell your entire vision, what do? You make the most of what you have. So the production crew gets super scrappy and they decide rather than trying to show the episode, which is unwatchable and boring, we're going to create a reel. We're going to create a cut down of it. And we're going to put together what we believe is like the best 8 or 10 minutes of it. We're going to use a voiceover. We're going to re-script it. We're going to go ahead and do this so we have something to show people, something to show someone. So we can give people a picture of what this will look like. Because again, they went out and shot a pilot and it did not turn out the way they wanted or needed. But they could save the project by turning it into what it could be, giving people a sense of the experience. This is huge. This is huge for all of us. When we don't have the portfolio, when we don't have the client list, when we're moving into a new market, when we're unsure about the results, we can't just make stuff up and we can't move forward with nothing because people need to know us, they need to like us, and they need to trust us. We need to be able to enter into the conversations and build credibility with people. And so when you don't have what the finished product is, the next best thing is give people a taste of what the finished product will be. Architectural firms do this all the time. You don't see them worrying about reality and what this building or this house is going to look like. They show you artist renderings, right? They give you a sense of what it's going to be to sell the vision. So this is what the team behind American Gladiators did. Number one, they worked with what they had and they did a cut down, and they had now something to go to the broadcasters for to sell, to try and get people on board with it. The second challenge they ran into was back in the late 80s. If you wanted to sell a show to the stations, to the station owners, because they weren't all conglomerates at the time, if you wanted to sell a show, you had to go to one place. And that was this trade show where all of the showrunners and show owners and distributors and the broadcasters would all come together to do some horse trading. And they even say in the documentary there may have been bribes involved with it. But when American Gladiators shows up, there is no buzz at all. In fact, another company showed up to this trade show bringing back roller derby, this like rock and roll roller derby, and they had all the buzz. They had a better pilot. They had a better concept. People understood what it was. They had like alligators in pits or something coming out. And it was so easy for people to understand exactly what it was. And American Gladiators, again, you got to remember, it was like weird. It was different. It didn't make sense. And they didn't have a full pilot. But this rock and roll roller derby, people got it and they understood it. And that was the show that got all the buzz that was going to get sold. So what did the team at Gladiators do? I love this so much. They decide that they're going to look at, well, what are their best assets? They got these athletes. They got these bodybuilders. They got these people in weird spandex costumes. So why don't we pull like a Schwarzenegger-like approach and hit the street, so to speak, like get out there on the trade show floor? So the production company hires like these actors to dress up in like Greek garbs, like imagine the gold leaves in your hair and imagine the white togas, and someone's drumming and they're like going like boom, 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 boom. And they start at one end of the event floor. And as the American Gladiators come in, there's like banners and there's a whole processional and everything. And they're going to go ahead and make noise and they're going to walk the floor. Now, are they allowed to do this? No. Did they ask permission to do this? No. But it didn't cost that much money to hire a few actors and build a bit of buzz, because the one thing that they had going for them were these athletes. So let's use them. Security apparently is chasing after them, trying to get them to stop because they are breaking all the rules. But what else happened? They got some attention. They totally stood out. And by the time that they got to their booth with the Greek-looking people and with the drummers and with all the athletes, they had and the security guards, of course, they had a crowd of people following them. And that drummed up the attention they needed for an executive to get up there and sell the shit out of that program. He did his dog and pony show. He talked about how great it's going to be. He sold the vision of what will be, and the show sold. Now, here's the real kicker. American Gladiators goes on to run for 7 seasons. It ends up making a ton of money through merchandising. It becomes a cultural phenomenon and is on The Simpsons and all these TV shows. And Ellen, you know, before she had the talk show and she had her comedy show, they did a crossover episode. It was a huge deal. And what happened to rock and roll, whatever, I don't even remember what it was called, roller derby? Got picked up, didn't make it, it got canceled. For me, the real takeaways from Muscles and Mayhem and why I loved this documentary was not how salacious it was not about the sex and the drugs and the steroid use and how crazy everything was. I mean, it's fun. It's interesting to learn about. But my real takeaway from this was, man, how hard they worked. One, they had to be able to develop this concept from a name. They made up all this stuff as they went, and it didn't work. The pilot was a train wreck, and really people should have got fired. It was that bad. But they managed to save it by painting the picture of what could be. And then on top of that, when they showed up to sell this thing and there was a bigger competition out there who had more of a presence, who had a head start, who had all of the buzz, did they just give up? No. They created their own buzz by just hiring someone to get out there and drum up some business. There is so much you and I can learn from this. If you're someone who's waiting for perfect, or you want everything to be all figured out before you start something, or if you're worried that another competitor is out there with more interest drumming up more business than you are, maybe, just maybe, you need to watch Muscles and Mayhem, an unauthorized story of American Gladiators, to learn these sales lessons. Okay, to wrap up, 3 key takeaways from this episode. Number 1, it's totally okay to make things up as you go along. In fact, if all you have is a name, get the team together and start fleshing it out. If all you have is an idea, go ahead and start developing it. If all you have is things in development, go ahead and start testing it on a real audience, real people. So many entrepreneurs wait way too long protecting their ideas before they test it with real customers, test it in front of a real audience, go out there and make it happen. Number 2, if you don't have anything you can use to sell, make something up. There's nothing wrong with grabbing a little of A and a little of B, bringing it together to create something new, to paint the picture of what you want this to be, of what your vision is. And that is exactly what the team here did when they got back with their pilot and it was garbage. They didn't just sit on their hands. They did a cut down and they made it what it needs to be to sell it. And number 3, when you are facing the biggest competition in the room who already has all the buzz, just go out there and outbuzz them, outballsy them. Go ahead and make some things happen. Be louder, be crazier, do whatever you need to do to be able to get the attention so that way you can start your page. So thank you for joining me for another episode of How to Sell More. One last thing for you. If you've made it this far into the podcast, you probably should subscribe. And while you're at it, head over to Instagram. Make sure that you follow us at Sales Loop Brand on Instagram. And why would you want to do that? Well, each week I share practical strategies and tips just like these to supercharge your business growth and boost sales. I'm Mark Drager. Thanks for listening.